Good morning, everyone. Oh, we lost Susan. I will call to order the county board meeting for September 19th. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Good morning. All right, are there any disclosures of interest this morning? All right, hearing none, we will move on. Review and approve the previous board meeting minutes.
Move approval as presented.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the previous board meeting minutes. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. All right, review and approve the following items on the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
You are correct. All right, to review and approve the county board agenda. Any changes, Scott?
There are no changes, Chair.
Okay. Move.
Move to approve.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Review and approve the following items on the consent agenda.
Just a comment on one of them. Don't really need to pull it. The special board hearing for Mineola Township, they do not meet at their town hall unless it's the annual meeting. They meet at, excuse me, some Zambrota's Fire Station on Jefferson Drive. So that's just a note that that is a change of address. Other than that, I'd move approval of the consent agenda. Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Anything else? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Regular agenda, Land Use Management Director's report. Morning.
I can't tell. It's on. Okay. So we are at a point where we have a couple of people that are up for their term limits. And so we've given the board a couple of options. If we do lower on the planning commission, the Board of Adjustment, we have 6 people. On the planning commission, we have 9, and we could go to 6 or 7, depending on what you want to do. Keep in mind, on the planning commission, we do have 1 county commissioner sit on the planning commission. So we could do that either by January 2024 or January 2025 through some term limits. So option 1 is to go down to 6 or 7 member. And option 2 is leave it at 9 members and reappoint the upcoming positions. I did want to make a note also that because of the redistricting, that Commissioner Majerus had appointed somebody, and now they are in Commissioner Anderson's district, giving him 3 appointments and Commissioner Majerus 1 appointment. So with this, regardless of your options, you might want to consider if you keep the same number of people, you might want to consider dropping that one and letting Commissioner Majerus appoint a second person, or if you go down to a lower, then just dropping that 1 position. So we have 2 options. Direct staff to amend the zoning ordinance to reduce the number of PAC members beginning January 1st, 2024. Reappoint Chris Buck to a second term beginning January 1st, 24 to represent District 2. Appoint a new member for the vacant position in District 5 as soon as possible. Option 2 is maintain the 9-member PAC configurations. Reappoint Chris Buck to a second term beginning January 2024. Appoint a new member for District 3, replacing Dick Nystuen beginning January 2024. Appoint a new member for District 5 as soon as possible, and let the current term expire on December 31st, 2023, and fill that vacancy with a citizen from District 4. And then our second recommendation is the Board of Adjustment and reappointing those people that we have listed there. So with that, do you have any questions about the first with the Planning Commission going down or keeping the maintaining the same amount?
So through attrition, if we went through attrition, we could just go to 7 next year, go and be down to 6 then by the beginning of 25.
Correct. The only thing about the 6 is I think maybe, Sam, if you remember, maybe once or twice, we really don't like that even number in case we need a tiebreaker. So, if you went down to 7, that would give us an odd number.
Sure.
Yes.
I did discuss a little bit last night with our PAC committee. They're saying there's a couple of times been a struggle with getting a quorum, vacations and things going on. So 6 is maybe, like you say, a little bit low. I mean, I guess I would be okay with 7. You hate to see some of these, there's so much knowledge in these people here on this board right now. I hate to see any of them go, but I can understand the 7. I would be comfortable with 7.
Other than the cost savings, what's the advantage of 7?
Kind of piggybacking on what Commissioner Gresseth is now I only need 4 for a quorum. That makes it a little bit easier. And years ago, we didn't contact all the members before a meeting, and we'd go to some meetings and we didn't have a quorum, and that's not fair to the applicant or the people that did show up. So we call ahead of time, and it's be a lot easier if I only needed to get 4 for a quorum than 6. And, as I kind of explained, I think earlier with one of the commissioners is sometimes you do get some committee members that do most of the talking, and then the other committee members just don't want to talk or participate as much. But I think if you have a smaller group, you have a little bit more participation with all the members.
And do you see any disadvantages to the smaller group?
I don't think I do. It's been working well with the 6 on the Board of Adjustment. I think, like I say, I think we see a little bit, and Sam, you can come up if you want to, but I think we see a little bit more of engagement with the smaller group. You can't just let one person talk the whole time and not participate. So,
Thank you.
Jason, anything?
No, it's just a matter of how, if you're gonna move it down to 1 board member and then 6 other members, how are you gonna divvy it out in 5 districts?
so we've got, I think that's the chart there. We've got just everyone gets 1. So Linda gets 1. Brad, looks like we get 2 for Brad. Here. And
You got
for
an even
that.
number that you're gonna try
Yeah.
to make out of 5 districts, so what
Yeah.
happens? So that's something I get it that we're down to 7
mhm.
at the end of the year, but then what? So I mean, you're gonna say Red Wing doesn't need any representation and the out counties get 2? And I'm fine with that,
I would,
I mean, is that what we're getting in mind?
just a
way to do it.
suggestion is
Yeah.
you could have 5 appointments from districts and 1 at large.
Mhm.
That is,
Floater.
From where?
yeah, it doesn't matter where they're from, but
Mhm.
1 at large and then your commissioner on there. Or you could put 2 commissioners on there
Mhm.
and 5 from the county.
Yeah.
You could do it either way.
However you want to do it. Mm.
So that's what we're not gonna set in stone of how we're gonna present with that, or just moving it. I'm fine with moving it down to 7, but if we're gonna figure out as the days go on or the year goes on, how we're gonna,
So if you decide to go down to 7, then we would come back with a proposal on that. Because
fine,
it's
I'm
got
good
to
with
go
that.
through the planning commission.
You doing a motion for that?
Yep.
Yes, please.
Evelyn?
I'll
I
make a
would.
motion that we drop to 7 members on the PHC.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to reduce the number of the PAC board to 7.
And then that will come back as a amendment to the zoning ordinance
Correct.
with suggestions on how we fill that going forward.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you want to, excuse me, did you want to go through and basically recommend option one then for the planning commission. And then the zoning ordinance, do you want to reappoint Mr. Buck and then appoint a new member for District 5 right away?
I believe so.
What are we doing with, Jason's?
So we would be. We would be going down to the 7th, so then. If we go down to, yeah, if we go down to the 7th, then, Mr. Stenderson would not be a reappointment.
And Mr. Buck wouldn't either if we're gonna bring
We're gonna ask
number
on the
5.
request is
District
to
5.
reappoint Chris Buck to the second term.
Then we're taking 2 off and adding 1 on, so we're only dropping 1.
We are at, well,
You're gonna get rid of Dick Nystuen too.
yeah.
Yeah.
And Commissioner Betcher still has an open one, so she
Yeah.
needs to place.
So the 2 that we're not going to, Dick Nystuen is done and Howard Stenderson would be done. So that's taking 2 off,
Two off.
and then we're bringing back on District 5, so that's gonna add 1.
Hers is vacant right now,
Correct.
so she would have one regardless.
Yep.
Yeah.
Am I not following this right?
Yeah.
We
Well,
have
there'd
to-
be 6 then.
we have to
and I
drop
think-
3 and add 1.
Yeah.
All right, so right now the motion would be just for the number, correct? And then you will come back with how we sort that out?
Yes, for the zoning change, but we
Mhm.
do need to, I'm just asking if you wanted to reappoint, regardless of what option you take, did you want to reappoint Chris Buck?
Yes.
Okay.
I think through attrition, I think by the end of 25, Darwin Fox will be up and Tom Gale will be up, and they both will go off. And that leaves district. Then I would have one. You would need to replace one with, for Darwin. You only have one on there now.
Mhm.
And you'd already be down to one.
Okay.
Jason would be down to one, and then Susan would have to replace one. So I think we can do it 2 ways. Either you can say, pick and choose who you want terms to end, because quite frankly, the term you could end Tom Gale's and you could end Darwin Fox's today, if you wanted to.
Mhm.
I think the best way is to do it through attrition.
Mhm.
And by the end of next year, we would be down, by the beginning of 25, we would be down to 6 members. And then we would, through the process, we'll figure out how do we fill it and have that 7th one.
Yeah.
Is it at large? Is it some other way?
So we can give you those options later. So today, if you just say you want to go down, we'll give you the options for 7 and 6. And then I guess it's also the question of reappointing, if you wanted to reappoint Chris Buck. Otherwise, we can bring that back as a separate meeting.
You know what you want to do?
I would say do it through attrition. I would replace Chris Buck and we would run through that. And by the end of next year, we'd be down to where we need to be. And Susan would need to find someone.
Well, I've asked,
ASAP.
I've asked 3 people. One said, maybe. One I'm waiting on, and the third one said if the second one won't do it, he'd be willing to do it. So, but I gotta hear from the second guy.
It
But
is-
I don't know when the term expires, because
Well, typically what we do is once you start somebody, we really start their time on a January
see.
1st, and then we go 3 years from there.
so they wouldn't start till January 1st.
They could, in the past, they could come in and see the meetings and stuff, but
Okay.
yours is open. I think we would still just, in the motion, say your term really starts January 1st.
All right, thank you.
And I think, I've had trouble finding people that are willing to serve. I think all of us will have that. You've obviously asked a few people. It's not easy. It's a big job. It is a big job. And you need the right people on there. So, right. So I think going down to just doing it through attrition, we'll get the ordinance changed to meet what we need, and we can put it in the ordinance that we're gonna get there through attrition or whatever. But I think that's the way to do it.
Okay, so I'm seeing that as the option 1, what I have listed here. Is that correct?
He made the motion, so he has to agree to that.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll agree to that with my second.
All right. We have a motion and a second to go with option one. All those in favor say aye.
I,
Anyone opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, now the recommendation 2 is if you are ready to reappoint Daniel Knott, Randy Retzikel, and Dennis Teddy. If you're not ready to reappoint the Board of Adjustment members, we can come back at another meeting, but it'll have to be before the first. And I don't know if you've spoken to any of your people there.
I have not talked to Randy, but if he's willing, I'd certainly reappoint him.
Mhm. The same would be true for Dennis if he's willing. I
Okay.
could reappoint him.
Should we?
Reach out.
reappoint them? Or
What?
do you want us to come back?
Well, I think
I
we,
would communicate with them and reappoint them as long as they're willing.
Mhm.
To do these things.
Okay, so we'll hold off on the Board of Adjustment one, and if you can.
Yeah.
Let me know if your people are still willing, then we can bring this back.
And you can send me a number, I assume. or-
Yep.
All right.
Absolutely.
Was it simpler for you to reach out to him since you have communications with him at the?
We certainly can, but their commissioner reappointment.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's up to you, however you want us to handle
No, I got numbers. I'll connect with.
I'm
with
happy to
Maureen.
call Dennis if you get me the
Let's
number.
hopefully get it on, let's hopefully get it on the, either the first meeting in October, or the second meeting in October and get it done.
Okay.
Yep.
it. All right, thank you.
Human Resources Managers Report.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, the Personnel Committee, there's 2 items on here for Human Resources, but first is the Personnel Committee that met this morning. They reviewed 2 recommendations from the Sheriff's Office. One was to create a Deputy Emergency Management Director position. There was consensus from the committee to support that. The second item was a request for 2 additional full-time patrol deputies for the City of Goodhue contract that's coming up. That was recommended that there was additional discussion that the board needed to have on that. And at this point, I'll ask if anybody from the Sheriff's Office wants to come up and address those issues. Or not.
Can we take the emergency management one first?
Yes. That one will go faster.
Mhm.
I would move that we approve the
I'll second that.
request.
All right, we have a motion to approve the request for the emergency manager,
Management Director.
Deputy.
Deputy Director.
deputy director. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Does anybody else have any questions on that one? All right,
Nice job, Chad.
Yeah, good job. Good job.
all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, that motion passes.
We don't bite, Chad.
All right, now we move on to the second one.
I'll start. We had some good discussion with the Personnel Committee. As you know, the City of Goodhue essentially disbanded their police department. And we have taken over law enforcement role for them with an agreement through December for a contracted hours of 6 hours a day. Or, yeah, 6 hours a day, 7 days a week. During a staffing analysis, Major Johnson, that's why he's sitting here. He's our schedule person, and we've determined that we can replace the 2 full-time, 5 part-time. It's on. I don't-
I don't think it's on. I don't see the red button. There you go.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Mike's determined that we can replace the 2 full-time and 5 part-time Goodhue officers with 2 full-time Goodhue County Sheriff's deputies. And all the costs are in front of you. We do have those contracts through 2024 with 4 other communities in Goodhue County that end December 31st, 2024. So it was our thought to just continue that process until the board comes up with a philosophy on what you should charge our cities And I hope that that can happen soon, so some of our towns can kind of plan accordingly. Preferably, well, I'd like to see, I'd like to see it on a fee schedule. If the county board establishes a fee for law enforcement wages per hour, that would alleviate a lot of headaches for our office. My job is to do law enforcement, not dicker with wages and all that. That's your job. And so that's what I foresee happening really soon, I hope. In fact, ideally, I'd like to get it on this December's fee schedule. So it's done. Cities know how to plan. We have the prices on what actual costs can and will be moving forward. So we have that information for you. But essentially what we're asking for now is 2 full-time deputies to help us do what we have to do for 5 communities and 22 townships. And with that, I'm gonna let, if you have any questions, obviously I'll answer them. Mike gave a pretty good synopsis of scheduling. Maybe that'll help the board see where we're coming from and at the request. So, and keep in mind, we didn't ask for this. But we can handle it. So Mike, go ahead and.
So this morning, a lot of our conversation came back to true cost. So I'm going to kind of avoid talking about that because that's a whole separate discussion. We, I think, all understand that that's something that needs to be worked on. What I'm here to talk about right now is just how we need to staff the Sheriff's Office Patrol Division. Just to give you a rundown of how our patrol division works. We have 2 day shifts, 2 night shifts, in a 2-week pay period. Each of those shifts works 7 days. So they work 11.5-hour shifts, which then they overlap a little bit. So what we're looking at covering in the city of Goodhue is 3 hours during the day and 3 hours at night. To cover this, we're asking for the 2 additional staff, and those staff would be used in what we call a power shift position, which means they work in between those day and night shifts. So they would start at noon and work until about 11:30 at night, which would cover day and night, and as well as the busiest time for calls for service for the patrol division, which is usually between 2 and 10. So what we are looking at covering is 3 hours during the day, 3 hours at night. But it's not just that we're covering. We're also replacing a full-time police department, which what they did was respond to calls for service in the city of Goodhue. So in the 3 weeks that it was since we had taken over the calls for service in Goodhue, we had 37 calls for service. Breaks down to about a call and a half a day. Now, when we handle calls, they vary greatly in how long we actually put man hours into it. Some calls, we're assisting the fire department on a medical. That's 1 deputy, shows up for maybe 15 minutes to a half hour. But we're also taking bigger calls as well. We're taking burglaries, we're taking domestics, we're taking death investigations, which these calls involve multiple deputies for multiple hours at a time. So if we're handling an arrest situation, we've probably got 2 to 3 deputies working on that. And it's probably going to be something that each person is on for 2 to 3 hours at a time between the initial call, interviews, investigation, arrest, and reports. So that 3 hours during the day and 3 hours at the evening doesn't necessarily include those hours of the proactive patrol that we're doing doesn't include us handling the calls in the city of Goodhue. Now we're taking away from other areas of the county for patrol as well. Now we have, if we are full staffed, we have 5 people working during the day and 6 people working at night currently. That's full staff. That's not without somebody who's on vacation, comp, sick, injury, FMLA, or anything like that. So more than half of our time, we actually operate at our minimum staffing, which is 4 during the day and 5 at night. Now, during the day, 1 deputy is assigned to the city of Pine Island almost exclusively. And then we also have 3 hours that we cover in the city of Goodhue. which then leaves 2 deputies to handle the other 760 odd square miles of the county. At night, we have 5, which covers Pine Island, Goodhue, Wanamingo, and then an hour in Belchester and Denison as well. So same at night, which is usually our busiest time of the day, we end up with 2 deputies who are handling the rest of the county, while those other 3 deputies are handling contract towns. Which if then we add our 2 staff, each shift would be able to have 1 power car that would then take over the calls for the city of Goodhue, handling during those busiest times, and also when they're asking for their proactive patrolling time. I think that kind of lays the groundwork of the reasoning why and what our scheduling looks like. So I'll open it up for questions.
One of the issues we came up with this morning was, one, he laid a very clear case as to the need for 2 extra deputies. Currently, we're paying $60,000 in overtime costs. Deputies, nobody can work as much time as they are now demanded that they work to come in to work overtime. I mean, you can do that in a crisis situation, but it burns people out very, very quickly. I think our biggest problem was the cost, that with equipment and everything, we're talking about $412,000. That at the moment, figuring out true program costs, it's really $69 and some cents per hour as opposed to the 55, 59 that we're 55 that being charged. That is being worked on to find out what the true program cost really is. And the savings, Scott had the savings to the city of Goodhue was $205,000 even after paying the county. So they're saving over $200,000. And the rest of the county is having to pitch in to pay for it. So that was where we ran into problems this morning. Not that we didn't understand that, of course, if we're going to take on more, then of course they need more deputies. So questions?
Just a comment. I don't think it's a surprise to anybody. I've always said we need more deputies out there. But this will help us get some more patrol on the road outside of Goodhue, besides inside of Goodhue. I understand that. Did the committee members on the personnel committee agree with the thought process of getting this on a fee schedule?
That came up at the very end as we were running out of time. So I certainly absolutely support that and think it would be very good to have a committee of the whole where we come forward and really have an opportunity to discuss a fee schedule, and then the different places could decide, all right, based on this fee, here's the number of hours that we want to contract for or can afford to contract for.
Well, I guess my question would be, we could do it, we could have a committee of the whole on it, but I think the committee of the whole should come after it's been vetted through another committee of a couple of board members and staff to figure out the different options there are to do it. Cause we can get it from, you know, the sheriff's office and what the true cost is. Yep, that's fine. But how are you gonna implement it? How are you gonna, I mean, we have contracts, like you say, that are out to the end of next year.
Through 24.
My thought is we're gonna have to bear this burden until we get to new contracts, because no city right now is levying for an increase in their policing contract with the sheriff, their contract with the city or with us. So they need an opportunity to, we need to get through this. We need to give them some things. And it may spur Goodhue to try to re-up their force. I don't really think so, but it may. But we have to give them the time to be able to operate. So I think we need to approve this Yep, we know where it's gonna cost us dollars going forward, but we're also gonna get extra service in the county because they're only there 6 hours. They're gonna be somewhere else the other 5.5. So that will get us more coverage in the county. And then work on, if we're gonna put it in the fee schedule, if we're gonna do it through contract negotiations, however we decide to do that, that's gonna have to come after this. Because we had to know this before we go into the budget talks, just down the, do we need to put 200,000 more into our levy just until we figure this out? And maybe it'll come back out, maybe it won't. But we need to know that now before we adopt a preliminary levy that doesn't include these costs. We have to know that. I would personally want to just move forward, get the deputies, and then come back and work on how we're gonna move forward with our cities to do contracting in the future. But I think it's like at the end of 24,
All of them ended.
all of them end, and in 25, we'll have plenty of time to get the information out there. So
Well,
everybody can adjust
And
to
we're
it.
gonna wanna get that by the end of this year, so the city has a year.
Yeah.
You know, we can't come up with that at the end of
No,
24.
right.
No, I agree. So getting it on the fee schedule is one
Yeah.
avenue. Or is it that we just come up with a contract amount that,
Yeah.
that we're gonna contract for per hour,
Mhm.
We did,
however we do it?
we did discuss a little bit about, the equipment that Goodhue does have. I
Right.
don't know where their vehicles are at. I mean, is that,
We can have some more conversation with,
can that buffer
With that.
this for a little bit, you know, and so we don't have to look at that 412. You know, I understand we want our own and we want everything similar, so one deputy has to use a different vehicle, but it, so, you know, anything we can do to, because we're in a transition time and we're finding out information that we really didn't realize before, so.
Mhm.
Savings to the community is huge for them. The other communities, if they take a look at this, if we don't adjust our fee schedule, they'd be silly not to come to the county
Mhm.
and get their police protection, you know?
Mhm.
I mean, like every city in Goodhue County would. I mean, why, look at the budget savings. So,
Yeah.
yes, it's, I like your idea to get a couple commissioners and, you know, get it nailed down a little bit more and then go with, a committee of the whole. And can we invite in the cities then at that point for the committee of the whole or?
They're public meetings, anybody can come. I just think sometimes, excuse me, I just think sometimes it's better to have those conversations in a committee structure and you can vet out you throw out everything at the wall and see what sticks
Mhm.
and then narrow it down and come back with some real, this'll work. There's better for this and better for that. Because committee of the wholes can just drag on and you can't make a decision anyway.
Hmm.
But certainly we could hone down the information to a narrower scope and bring it back to the board.
I told the committee earlier that I don't pretend to know what former sheriffs in the 80s and 90s, how they implemented these community policing contracts. But when I arrived, we knew we were way under. So we in 2025, we'll have increased their fees 27% already. So just so you know, yes, they're getting a good deal, but they were really getting a really good deal in 2019. So we've started that process and that was actually painful for a 9%. So we have to just know what's coming. And I don't disagree that they should pay what they're getting. I've never disagreed with that. It's a board philosophy and it has to come from you, not me.
The other piece of this is, I think in this discussion, we can also fold SROs into it.
Mhm.
I
They
think,
will be essentially,
yeah,
I'm
I
guessing.
think that committee could also talk about the SRO.
I agree.
So whatever committee that is, whether it's personnel or whether it's somewhere else, I don't know, but I just think there's a couple of issues there that the board's gonna have to come to grips with,
Mhm.
and the best place to do that's through a committee structure and then come back with some recommendations, some options.
Well, especially finding out what literally the true program
Right.
costs are to be able to have a deputy
Mhm.
out there per hour doing everything that needs to be done. So knowing that we want to try and get all that we need to get all that done by December 31st, does that give you an okay timetable to work with finance?
We're essentially ready.
You ready? Okay.
Well, I have a question. I think you were saying that this current contract actually would save Goodhue $200,000. Is that right?
5, I think. Yes.
Okay. And was there any discussion about how that seems kind of goofy for the county to, be paying out, for them to be paying less than they were before? Or was there not a discussion about that?
This is all new information that's come up. I mean, this is where we set this schedule, like as Marty said, we've been behind the 8 ball for quite a while. And now we're actually finding out with this situation
How
that
far?
how far we are behind.
But, excuse me, but tread lightly because Pine Island's probably saving $500,000. Wanamingo's saving $300,000.
Yeah.
And
So
the
this
others
isn't
are
just
saving,
Goodhue, yeah.
it's not a Goodhue issue.
I understand that. I understand that. It's just that the Goodhue thing is bringing it to a head is really what's happening. And so the other communities really aren't paying for their squad cars. They aren't really paying for a lot of things. The county's picking up that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so we aren't offering Goodhue a different deal. It's the same deal, although I think a couple of communities have even lower rates than the ones we're talking about right now. So I do understand that. And then my question with the policing contracts, I think you said that it's the 6 hours a day, but it really takes quite a lot more time than that when you get these calls that average 1.5 a day, I think you said. And do we charge anything for that?
No, and so that goes into that true cost type
I see,
numbers
I see.
because what they're paying for is 6 hours of active patrolling.
Mhm.
But because they contract with us, we also handle their calls for service,
Mhm.
which were being handled by the police department before.
So there's a lot more involved than just the 6 hours.
Correct.
Yeah. And, I think one of the things they're trying to do with the LEC contract is look at true cost. And so to me, if we're doing that with the city of Red Wing, we would need to be doing that with the other communities as well. And that we don't want to be making money, but probably we don't want one city to be subsidizing another would be my view.
Kind of a rabbit hole. We can go down a big rabbit hole.
I just want to caution us to say that Goodhue County or Goodhue City is saving 200,000. They're losing full-time police coverage
Mhm.
24/7
Right.
in that they have currently. So in this process, they actually do lose something
Mhm.
and they're going to view it that way. I don't blame them. I would if I were them.
Mhm.
That we had someone in our town every hour of every day that could respond to a call.
Mhm.
They're not gonna have that with Goodhue County. So I just caution, it's not apples to apples,
Mhm.
it's apples to something else.
But you do respond to a call. Every call that comes in, you respond to.
Correct.
Yeah. So they aren't in the community, but they still have the 24-hour response. And I understand it's different, but it's
The response if they're in Zumbrota to Goodhue is different than if you're
right.
on First Street and you gotta go to Third Street.
And to a large extent, I
So
think,
there's a big difference. And we, in the past, if there was a call in Goodhue that they were handling, we would assist. So we would be there anyway in
If
the
they
past. So not
asked for
all
assistance.
costs are new costs. Some costs we already had.
so there's
I
a
think we need to be really
there's
clear
a
about that too.
baseline level of service we were providing to
Sure.
Pine Island before the contract, to Goodhue before the contract, to Wanamingo before the contract. And then there's increased things we're doing. So probably before this contract, you weren't responding to 1.5 calls a day. Maybe you were.
It all depends on what calls they were getting.
Okay.
The majority of
some-
calls can be handled by one officer or deputy.
Right.
But if they did need more than that, then we would go back.
I understand that.
and-
So a percentage of them. So there was a baseline amount that you were providing, but this is far above and beyond that baseline in terms of the number of calls you're responding to.
Yes.
And also the amount of time in terms of investigation and all of that kind of. I understand that.
Jason, anything?
Yep. Your current staffing level, you're short one deputy or two?
Short, well, we have 11 people in either backgrounds, training. Backgrounds and
They're
training
looking-
essentially,
Uh,
that we have onboarded. Some we just offered jobs. We were 4 short last week. We offered those jobs.
So
So
you
that's-
offered, haven't filled, so even if we said you're agreed, or we agreed to 2 other positions, you have people technically to fill those positions? Not yet necessarily, so.
We actually do.
yes.
We had
So
a
we have-
nice
we're
process.
short
We had a
four
nice
people,
process
so
last time.
When we look at this $60,000 of forced overtime and how we're doing this stuff, maybe isn't necessarily an accurate depiction because of the fact we're short 4 officers currently, so. If you have those additional 4 people on there, the overtime would change, okay? So we're short people already, okay,
Right.
which we get up to staffing levels where we're currently would show, the overtime would show a different picture, so. Your level of service throughout the county, cities and whatever it is not mandated by state or by the county. That's a decision that you, sheriff, have made in your
Mhm.
staffing to say that how we're gonna structure and do it.
Actually,
That's yours, that's your,
the county board did.
then the county board can revisit or whatever we have to do. I'm just, from my outlook, from the outside looking in, I'm baffled of how we cannot pick up 6 hours. Under the understanding we're still short 4 people. If we had 4 people to fill every position,
Mhm.
seems to me picking up 6 hours, or whatever, wouldn't be that big a deal to do what it is. The other concern is we're gonna pick where these other 4 officers are coming from, whether you guys have asked a question, we don't know. Not a whole lot of people coming out of school to do this in retirement, so we're picking from other, so one of those could be from Zimbrota, could be former police officers from Goodhue, could be Red Wing, could be Lake City. So all of a sudden Zimbrota's short 3 people.
That's
And they're
that's a
on.
valid argument.
So we're picking from Peter to pay Paul, whatever you want to look at. The contract with Goodhue, what we have agreed to ends this year, but they have not signed and agreed to a 2024 contract. If they have the numbers ready, we should be knowing a true cost and everything to present Goodhue with those numbers next week, within a month, to say, yes, we may be putting a hole that we're saying we're gonna have to offer because we did to the other communities for that year, but they need to start planning. If you said, that's a whole nother discussion of it is there. So
Well, I think
I
all,
have a hard time, approving going on to 2 additional with the outlook. Like I said, we can take, because the calls always go back to the population centers, no matter what that you can find. Typically, you get the odd calls in the townships. Same thing Dakota County's dealing with. Why do the cities want to do it? So until we get a true program cost or get this all with everybody driven in, the short staffing and everything up to roll, I'm going to have a hard time. I'm going to vote no on this. I do not support 2 additional people, more cars, more stuff without looking at this, and maybe the county board has to look at what level of service we want on the townships. We want in the cities, or what we're going to provide, if that's what you expect out of the board to make the decision with your input. So I'd rather see us up to full staff, see how it plays out, get a real program cost out to all of these people, out to all the cities and everybody else, to have an understanding of where we're going to be, because it's a lot of money, and we might need to reevaluate our level of service and what we do. So it's my opinion. Theory today, so thank you.
When will the 4 spots be filled? I mean, in the next 2 months, the next month?
Probably within the month. They've all finished their physical and medical, and they're about halfway done through their backgrounds. So those should be done in the next couple of weeks. And then it's a matter of, if they've passed all of those things, them giving a 2-week notice. And since these were, a good portion of them have extensive law enforcement backgrounds, their training process would be a lot shorter than some of the others that we've hired that are new to law enforcement.
But you're right, Commissioner. We are robbing Peter to pay Paul. We didn't have any kid in our application come out of school. It was all from other departments. And that everybody's that way.
That's not any different than anywhere else in Minnesota or the United States. It's constantly that.
One of
We
the-
were fortunate to get them. And we got some good ones.
One of the things that came up at the legislative conference for Association of Minnesota Counties was that in the state of Minnesota, we are down 600 law enforcement officers. throughout the entire state.
Mm.
So, yes, it's a,
Not being in the market to hire isn't gonna help that. If you have to be in the market to hire. I would move that we go ahead with the additional 2 deputies, but we do need to make the adjustment into the budget going forward till we get farther down this with understanding of where the costs, true costs end up.
we have a second. All right, we have a second. All right, we do not have a second for the motion, so it dies, goes away. What's the correct phraseology
Can I
of it?
bring up another motion?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Is it possible?
motion fails for lack of second.
Motion fails for lack of second. No,
Another motion would be in order.
Another motion would be, I would like to at this point, recommend we get 1 more deputy and see where the scheduling goes. Like Jason was saying, we get our other deputies on board. Does that cut into the overtime? You know, now this 412,000 cuts down to 206 if we do all of our own. And so 128 to 206 is 80,000 extra in our budget instead of 200. And it's just, it's just too much at this time. And I would just really like to, you know, take that. If we are full staffed, can we sneak those extra 3 hours? I think Jason's got a point, you know, can we sneak those other hours in? You know, there's a lot going to change in the next year and a half. I don't want to jump onto it too fast. And then all of a sudden we raise our fee schedule and Goodhue says, nope, we're going to have our own department. Pine Island looks at it and says, wow, if we're going to spend this and Pine Island's growing this fast, all of a sudden they're going to get their own department and we're going to have possibly extra officers at that time. Well, is it reality? I don't know. So I would like to make a motion that we hire 1 new deputy at this time.
I'll second that motion.
any other questions, comments?
Can that be accomplished without additional, car? Is it something you can look at your department and say, who's utilizing equipment? If we're gonna move one, do somebody not, throw Chad under the bus? Does he need a fully outfitted, squad? I know when he's going out to towers, he's on patrol or service, but do we look at somewhere where we don't need a fully outfitted squad that we can give
So,
somebody a van or something?
so we're currently waiting for squads to arrive.
Yep.
We can keep an extra car. Our
Yep.
maintenance costs would probably be more obviously than a brand new one, but we are able to keep something behind to outfit that 1 person. And maybe it's for a year, maybe it's for longer. When we can revisit this, if we want an extra squad then for that extra person. But for the time being, we would be able to keep one of our lower mileage vehicles, back for that.
That
And
was
and
one
we
of-
can ask Goodhue too about the car they do have. I don't know if it's 2020 or what it is even. But I mean, that's a possibility too.
I got it. The options are still there. I'd really like to see how it plays out when we get everybody on board and knowing that these deputies are coming from other communities of where this all shakes out. There's a lot and I'm optimistic that true program costs are the true dollar amount that the board will be on all together with understanding that they're gonna hit. I don't even want to throw a number out there because a lot of thought's gonna have to go. So a lot of things will work out. I still don't support hiring because I think there's a lot of things are gonna have to work out over the next year. And once we get the additional 4 people on staff to get up to where we are. I guess my aspect too, I'd support it if we didn't have to fully outfit or keep something back because it just feel with vacations, attrition or something. You don't know of anybody planning on retiring in the next year. You know, if this is that we have to have somebody in queue waiting to be hired that we're gonna. Might be a different way of looking at it, but I'd say let's get back up to full staff, my opinion, and I wanna see us at full staff and see how things shake out before I approve an additional deputy, if it's gonna be the full cost of trying to outfit that deputies.
We did talk about that briefly, that we also had concerns about the idea of city of Goodhue is gonna save their cars and we have to get new cars. Could we not figure out some way to use theirs or any other options? So I hope that is still move forward looking at that. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any other comments?
Just the only comment is no matter how we do this, we're taking 6 hours a day, every day, away from service to everybody else. Even adding the one, we're still taking service away from everybody else that's normally got the service we have. So it's just, we need to be aware of what we really are doing. It's lowering service somewhere else when we don't fully staff it.
All right, but yes,
Chair, just a couple things, you know, as Marty has more discussions with this city and possibly others, I think, you know, there are plenty of other models out there that need to be explored. I know some of them where a city's getting out of the policing business, they've sold their equipment for $1 back to the county. And if the squad cars are worth using, I mean, that saves us a squad car expense. I think Jason brought up a very valid point, which I kind of made across the hall too. These cities need to be on notice that we're likely moving towards closer to full, doesn't have to be full program cost, but closer to it. So if you're doing this just to save, you know, in this case, 60% of your budget next year may not be the best idea, because we're going to move towards, I think that the board is moving in that direction towards closer to full program costs. So, and then additionally, I think that whatever board members are interested in being on that committee with, you know, Brian Lucas and whoever's there from the sheriff's department to figure out what's fair and equitable moving forward. We should get that moving. And I don't think it's a one meeting committee. But I see lots of interest up here.
Yeah. I think,
5 candidates.
could
yeah,
that be something that the personnel committee just be
Well,
part
that
of,
could be
just do then?
Sure.
well, and then there'd be a kind of a Red Wing representative and an outstate or out county representative. Yeah, yeah, kind of.
That's what do.
Yeah, he is.
Almost to South Dakota.
There you go.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve one additional deputy. Anything else? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
All right, motion passes.
Madam Chair, the second HR item on the agenda is just a housekeeping issue. At the June 20 board meeting, we approved language for LELS 78, just adjusting how they can request vacation. We had not included the sergeants from ADC or dispatch, so this letter of understanding is simply a mirror of that language that they had. So we recommend passage of supporting this, the LELS 46 letter of understanding regarding vacation requests.
Move approval, Anderson.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to accept the language change in the LELS contract. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Tom. Public Works Director's report.
Good morning, board. I'm here today to discuss with you the Wanamingo demolition landfill and its potential closure. The Wanamingo demo landfill has been open since the mid-80s. It has been permitted with MPCA and in addition to Goodhue County to be operated by Mr. Glenn Steberg, who is with us today in the audience. He owns and operates the property that the landfill is on. Since I've been with Goodhue County over the last 10 years, we have been discussing the potential closure of the Wanamingo landfill as it continually fills up. Last year, we were approached by Mr. Steberg to discuss the possibility of siting a transfer station on this site. We discussed that with the board at a committee of the whole. Our zoning ordinances do not allow for a transfer station currently. And at that meeting, it was discussed that if a private entity would like to operate a transfer station in one of our smaller communities, that would be an option that they could look at, because that wouldn't impact our zoning. So fast forward a year from that committee of the whole, we recently, Greg had a discussion with the MPCA concerning rules that they are writing that govern what is going to happen with demolition landfills throughout the state of Minnesota. Once these rules are written and promulgated and go into effect, they're anticipating those to go into effect during the summer of 2024. Goodhue County's Wanamingo demolition landfill will be subject to these new rules. These new rules are exceptionally financially costly, and we would be bearing the weight of having to include financial assurance. An enhanced cover over the Wanamingo landfill would be required. We would have to extend groundwater monitoring from what is currently 20 years to potentially 30 to 40 years. The PCA hasn't quite determined what that time frame is going to be. And then we'd also have to treat the leachate that comes out of the landfill. So each of those potential rule changes have significant costs associated with them. The landfill, the demolition landfill is predicted to have kind of at most 2 years, and that's what we're operating under as an assumption. And that's based off of surveys that we have to do annually to report to the PCA, kind of where we're at with filling that site up. So with the rules changing next summer, staff approached SEH, the consulting firm that performs the monitoring at this landfill, to discuss with them, what the cost would look like to close a landfill now. So if the county moves forward with closure at this time and we start the process to develop the plans and ultimately get this closed before next summer, or before the rules go into effect next summer, the estimate that we receive from SEH is in excess of $400,000. Presently, Goodhue County has 2 agreements with Mr. Steberg. We have a landowner agreement and we have an operator's agreement. The landowner agreement provides availability for land disposal to the county citizens per its terms and conditions. The other is the operator's agreement, and that details, operating hours, site improvements needed, and others. Each of these agreements have a 5-year term and went into effect early 2022. The landowner agreement allows for the termination of the agreement by either party upon terms mutually agreed to by both parties. The operator agreement allows for termination of the agreement with a 60-day notice. So with that, unless Greg has some more to add to the discussion, there's a few alternatives that we can take a look at to avoid the potential financial liabilities associated with keeping the landfill open. The county could move towards closure by terminating the operations agreement, and then discuss terms with Mr. Steberg to terminate the landowner agreement. The county conversely could take a wait and see approach and see what the PCA ultimately does, but I know I don't like gambling that much. So the third option would be just to not take any action and allow the demolition landfill to fill up and then ultimately bear that financial burden that's going to be required by the rules that the PCA will promulgate. So with that, we're recommending that we move towards closing the demolition landfill.
Right, questions, comments from the board? Susan?
Can you comment at all about what a landowner agreement might look like? I know you can't say specifics, but I think the landowner would be quite interested in that. So,
We haven't even started those discussions, so,
Mhm.
I mean, we need to move this as the first step. And then we can start putting staff time in to try and answer some of those questions. This is something that recently just came up, say out of a phone call I had with PCA staff asking where they were with our permit on this.
Mhm.
And, my suggestion is that we start the process to close it, and then that gives us the opportunity to start working with Mr. Seberg on exactly what those agreements are gonna say. Right now, we have not put any staff time into what those revisions would be.
Mhm.
The time frame here to move to closure, it's tight because the PCA hasn't indicated to us when these rules would go into effect.
Mhm.
And
It's not summer of 24.
it's summer of 2024, but we don't know when.
June 21st,
Mhm.
it's only September 21st.
So an
That's go to
early,
April 1st.
early indications from the PCA were that if the rules are promulgated and they're in effect and we're not at closure state, then we'll fall under these new rules and requirements.
You know, and one more comment on, one of the requirements would be to increase the length of time that we have to do the groundwater monitoring. So the concern I have with that is PCA keeps finding more and more chemicals that need to be tested for, and they also can keep coming up with better monitoring equipment. And when they come up with better monitoring equipment, then the standards can get lower and lower on what they're looking for. And if they find a new chemical that's out there that hasn't been tested in the past, but is causing problems in different parts of the state, and we have to now start monitoring for those, and we hit one of these thresholds, click, the light goes on, and we have to clean the whole thing up. So the cost of us having to do that, I think it could be immense for the county to clean one of these things up. We've never been through it before, and I really hope Goodhue County never goes through it. So the sooner we start on this process and hopefully get something in place before they set those rules, could be saving future generations in Goodhue County a lot of money.
Sure.
Yes.
I have been in contact with PCA also. Mr. Stever did come into my office and we did contact, Sherry,
Sherry?
and very informative, just, you know, and I think she's actually doing us a favor by telling us, or
Mhm.
not only just, it's probably, you know, yes, this is gonna happen. This is a huge expense. The next step is what are we gonna do with this material that we're already collecting? What are we, you know, there's dumpsters there now. We're collecting the refrigerators, we're collecting the e-waste, we're collecting the metals. So there is a, like in the bottom column or the bottom paragraph there, it's that
Mhm.
permit by rule, you
Mhm.
know? And from my understanding in our conversation is we can basically keep operating as we are right now and go through the closing of this landfill. I don't think you know, I'm gonna support closing the landfill just because of the financial,
You can-
but
You can continue to keep operations of a certain portion of it. I mean,
Yep.
right now Glenn
Yep.
does bring in material
Mm.
and bury it as the
Right.
landfill is set for.
Yep.
That part of the operation would have to change.
once that
But
closed,
it-
but yeah,
Right, but as far as his containers that he has out there and he's collecting TVs and he's collecting other things that people want to get rid of that you cannot put into a landfill.
Yeah.
That portion could be covered by permit by rules.
so if we don't keep that thing open, we're gonna have ditches and everything filled with, people are just gonna dump worse than they already are now, so. So the, you know, the committee of the whole here, the last paragraph, you know, definitely want to look into that, the pros and cons, and, you know, in keeping that site available, you know,
Right, and-
for
yeah.
that.
And well, not to get too far off subject here, but if we're going to change zoning so you allow permit by rules in agricultural parts of the county, you're probably gonna have more requests coming in from other operators too. That are gonna want to try to do the same thing. So I mean, that's why land use management has been concerned about allowing demolition landfills within agricultural district of the counties at this time, because of other problems that they've had before. Now, these are smaller operations, But you could be opening a little bit more of a can of worms, but these are the things that we can discuss in the committee of the whole and
Yep.
have those discussions.
Because in my discussion with Sherry, it sounded like she would be willing to come up and, give us her take on it.
Mhm.
Because she agrees, she said, we have to handle this other materials that are being handled there and we have to do something with them and properly dispose of them.
Correct.
We have a motion one way or another.
Well, I just would echo what Todd talked about. We need to find a solution going forward. And that's gonna take working with land use, working with public works, working with solid waste, working with, however we can do that. Cause if it starts ending up out county in ditches, the townships will come back to us and it will still be our problem. This is not new. We've talked about closure out there for a long time. It's just now MPCA's kind of put it on the front burner for us. So I think we really got to deal with it. So but the other side of it is, you heard the cost, an estimated 500,000. That is not in our budget. We need to at least put it in for the preliminary until we figure out just where we go with that. We'll know more by November. If we get, the companies to give us a cost estimate, because we just need to get to that point. So I would move that we close the landfill, but work towards finding a solution for how we deal with that going forward. Whether it's through solid waste committee and then committee of the whole, or whether it's committee of the whole and then solid waste committee. We have avenues to work on this issue. So I would move that we close and work on finding a solution for that material somewhere.
Can I make one more comment?
Yes.
By ending the operator's agreement, that starts a 60-day window. So the demolition landfill would not close today or tomorrow. It would just start that clock. And then at that time, that'll give us enough time to notice the public and everyone else while we're in this transition.
Right.
But continue to work towards the next steps.
Well, I will second Commissioner Anderson's motion. Any other comments, questions?
Steve Burgess here. Would you like to hear any comments from him? Is there any questions we have for our landowner? Yes. Do you have any more questions or you have any more concerns? I want to thank you for showing up today and showing your interest. I appreciate that.
All right. It's been moved and seconded to close the landfill and move forward, working on what we are going to do and working on an agreement with the landowner. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Those are tough decisions.
Preliminary budget and levy.
Okay, thank you. First off, I'd like to thank the county board for their leadership and department heads through the process of putting the 2024 and 2025 budget together. Also like to thank our controller, Lucas Dowling, finance director, Brian Anderson, assistant to the administrator, Andrea Bank, and all of our accountants in preparing this. The county board received the preliminary levy on August 2nd. After that time, they had a budget workshop on August 22nd. In the preliminary budget, it was a $90 million budget with a preliminary levy of $43 million. I'll go through some reductions that the county board did, and then what the budget is currently at. Prior to getting to that though, during the workshop, the county board did use some of our one-time funds from the criminal justice aid that the state legislature passed this past year of $925,541. We did not use that entire amount. We did, although, use some for some law enforcement costs outlined by the sheriff. I do want to note that when using one-time dollars, it's probably preferred to use them on one-time costs versus operational costs. And what we did at that meeting, those were operational costs that are recurring. So when we do that, it actually makes the following year's budget worse. Additionally, at that meeting, it was highlighted that we will have additional dollars coming in from housing Dakota County inmates. I will note that, however, we've passed that agreement. Dakota County has not yet, so they're in the budget. We presume that contract will be passed, but it's technically, it's not for sure yet, so. With that, the 2024 preliminary levy is $617,503, which represents a $1.5 million increase or 3.8%. The working levy for 2025 was a $46 million, $46,112, or a $2.4 million increase, or 5.57%. With the increased valuations and growth in the county, this represents a reduction in the tax rate from 43.7% to 41.896%. I also do want to note that although the current need shows a 3.8% levy, we've just this morning, there's a few items that we know are outstanding. And I would like to list out some of those things that we have pending that we don't have final numbers or decisions on. Obviously, the City of Goodhue policing contract, and we also don't know if there's other cities coming forward. We still have the park manager position. And I also note that in the board's workshop, an additional mechanic was also proposed out back last February. That is still sitting out there. We have a school resource officer request from our school districts, which we have not responded to. We just heard about the cap and closure of construction and demolition landfill. The preliminary number on that is $500,000. And I will say that just about every estimate we've had since COVID started has been lower than it actually ended up being. We have the law enforcement center lease agreement discussions that are still out there. And I will note that we have a different number in the proposed budget than the City of Red Wing does, and it's about $70,000 difference. We have the recruitment and retention initiatives still out there. And in 2025, we will need to be determining how we will pay for the paid family medical leave that the state legislature just passed this past year. Previously noted the jail revenues. I also want to note that we've had either meetings or committee of the wholes discussing about the new state dollars for housing. There's $2 billion that was passed to the state. There's ongoing discussions about how we want to match those, whether it's through a trust fund and other ways. And then we also had discussions with some type of position with the solid waste SWCD. So with that, I would entertain discussions or any questions on the proposed 2024 and 2025 preliminary budget and levy.
One question I had, I think at the budget meeting that we had talked about funding the payroll at 98% rather than at 100%. And I don't think that's included in this. And so I think that, well, there's additional expenses. And of course, this is a preliminary budget and we want to give ourselves some wiggle room. I think that would be, if the 2% would be a bit over 800,000 that we wouldn't be levying for. Is that correct? Yeah.
Well, I think, I agree with, we need to look at whether that's 1% or 2% or what it is.
Right. Yeah.
If you look at staffing right now, we are filling closer to 100%.
Mhm.
We're getting there. I think I fully believe that Dakota County will come in with the contract. But to count it as a $200,000 revenue right now, when we don't have a signed contract, I think is premature. County boards make decisions and county boards change decisions that we think are going somewhere. So I think we have to add that back in and say, as soon as we get the contract, it comes back out. I agree with that. I think the 500,000 we're talking about with the landfill, which we don't have funded, we really need to add that because it is a cost that we just decided is coming forward. We need to add that in. The law enforcement lease, center lease, we don't have. And that could be,
70,000.
it could be any number between 100,000 to 0. We don't know. So I think we need to be careful about that. And then no matter what happens with the Goodhue policing contract, there's a little bit of uncertainty there. So where you wanna put those numbers, I think the 200,000 on the Dakota contract, the 500,000 for the landfill, those are pretty certain that 700,000 needs to be put back in because we know there's gonna be there some way. Some may come back out. The law enforcement center and the policing contract, I think we could absorb them if they don't come in where we think they're gonna come in.
And I do think that at a minimum, we could do a 99% funding of the positions, meaning we
Yeah,
have $400,000 there.
Right.
But to me, we're trying to set a preliminary levy, meaning we're trying to set a cap. We're not trying to get to exactly where we're going to be. I would like to see us under 4% in the end, given all the money that's come into the county. But I don't have any problem. If we did a 6% to start with, that would be 2.5 million. So it's more than we're going to need.
Right.
We wouldn't end up at 6%. We'd end up considerably lower, but it gives us the wiggle room to do what we need. I think 5.5, I think that would be 2.1 million. So that's more like 500,000 plus the 500,000 roughly from, so I think either one of those would be fine.
You want to set a percentage or you just want to, we have to.
Just want to,
And we
anybody
have-
else?
and we have to- Andrea has to come up with a number. 'Cause
Yep, no, I
the-
understand that. Does anybody else have anything they want to say about 5.5 or 6 or those are the numbers I was thinking about as a preliminary levy, not as a final levy.
And there's some real, contract comes in, 200,000 comes right off.
Yeah,
you know.
no, I
mean,
understand that.
those things, we'll know the answer to them.
Mhm.
We just don't know the answer today.
Right, and we don't know if something else is going to come up in the next 3 months that might impact what we want to do. I suppose the only danger of putting it at 6% is if that inspired us to spend more money when we shouldn't be. That would be the only danger
I
of
don't
that.
think that's gonna happen.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Even setting it at 5% gives wiggle room.
A little bit, yeah. The 5% is, yeah, 2,100,000. It does, yeah. So 5.5% would be splitting the difference, I guess, and I think that would be enough.
Other comments? About anything?
Yeah, I'm fine with going with 5.5.
Jason?
Yeah, 5% is overly gracious. There's a lot of money that got given back to the counties that
Mhm.
from this wonderful 20 billion surplus that they already pulled from this state, private sector taxpayers. You can be gracious and say you're gonna cut, but, or not necessarily cut is even the terminology, or give that extra money, but been through this multiple times. It never happens. You'll take some big items down and you'll still, so as of, for instance, we still got $100,000 to go into the drug court, right?
That was less than.
$400,000 we've taken out so far to put into the drug court. They don't need, don't have. And yet this board continues to take money from the private sector taxpayers to put in some kitty for the drug court. And you guys don't say anything about it. Don't worry about it. One question I had, why is it still in there? We've talked about it at the meetings because nobody does it. And very well, that's such a minimal amount, 100,000. Are you guys all going to talk about it the next time when the levy comes out when we're pulling 800,000, 500,000 landfill closures? Yeah, it gets brushed aside. We don't worry about it. Another one I question is that Public Works put in there, what was it, 250,000 for the radios for 1 year? We talked about it and it's still in there. Did you guys pull it out and talk about it? No, even the sheriff's department did it over like 4 or 5 years. It's ridiculous to replace all their radios when our ambulance services, our fire departments are doing it over the course of time. Why is it still in? There? Are you gonna discuss it come December? Nah, it's a minimal amount. So I see it all the time. If you guys think that it's good that the taxpayer has all this extra money to boot, even at 5.5%, even at 3.8, go for it. No, just brought up a couple issues that, you know, if we're gonna sit and figure out all these middle ones and go through it, which never happens, you look at the big amount, you get to that point, we discuss it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, nothing gets done, but no, I will not support 5.5. I won't even support 3.8. So I would just appreciate it if more people took a look at, still got to come out of the private sector. The state got us, took all this money, the surplus individuals didn't get anything back. A lot of that money came back to even get it to 3.8. Give the taxpayer a break. So.
Okay. We have an actual motion.
There's no motion on the floor.
Well, I'd make a motion to set the preliminary levy at 5.5%, and we'll say again, my goal is not that it end there.
I'll second the motion. You gonna come up with a number for us, Andrea? Because the resolution has to have a number.
I think the levy would then be $2,311,241.84. So,
Use that as the number.
yeah, I think that's correct.
It doesn't matter if
uh,
it's close to 5.5. That
$2,311,241.84 if it's 5.5. That works.
I think we have to be an even dollar amount.
All right. 41 then.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for the preliminary budget being 5.5%. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
All right, motion passes.
Okay, the next item, as you know, there's been a great deal of work done with the partnerships and collaborations in Goodhue County, the Prairie Island Indian community, and our community partners. They've had a project going on called the Honoring Dakota Project, and also have a mural project going on. The Honoring Dakota Project had an original budget of $450,000, which included $150,000 for the mural project. Currently, there is a funding gap of $50,000 on the mural project, and they're soliciting other community partners, which we have not contributed to the mural as of yet. We have contributed in-kind support to the overall project. We used some Goodhue County Mental and Chemical Health Coalition dollars from the county ARPA dollars previously. So I've discussed this with the chair and the vice chair, and we're recommending the contribution level of $10,000. There's a number of attachments on some of the work that's been being done, included in your packet. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions, comments? All right,
I'll second it.
we have a motion and a second to support the Honoring Dakota project. Any comments? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Southeastern Minnesota, multi-county housing and redevelopment. Buffy.
Good morning. My mic on.
This is the red button on.
Yep, nope.
Okay, there you go.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm Buffy Baranik, Executive Director of the Southeastern Minnesota Multi-County Housing and Redevelopment Authority, also known as SEMTRA. Thank you for the opportunity today to talk about our 2024 and 25 levy. As you're aware, SEMTRA has an annual levy request each year. and our full levy request is in your packet. There's a lot of information in there. It's the same information that you saw as part of the as the budget committee, at the committee of the whole, and again today. We presented at the committee of the whole because we had a different twist to our levy request this year. There's two options, and I'll put an asterisk around option B because I think that's something that we need to discuss a little bit further today. And exactly what does that mean, that option B? The reason for those presentations was really to explain those differences and make sure there was full understanding. And today I'm going to hit on some of the questions that came up and hopefully address those as well. Before I get started, I want to commend both you and staff for making housing a priority. Out of the housing studies that we've had done throughout this area, Goodhue County has really taken their housing studies seriously. They have a separate committee. I sit on the committee, and I think our goal is 2,200, and we're over our 500 already. And my goal and part of this levy request is really to help the county hit that goal, to help you hit your housing goal that you have set. And we have a one-time opportunity here. I don't think it's going to come around again. We had historic funding at the state level. We have $1.3 billion to spend on housing. It's going to be spent on housing. The question is where. And that option B is meant to address bringing some of those dollars back here to southeastern Minnesota. I'll also talk about some dollars that we do have available that we can leverage. And then as part of option B, that leverage component and why we're asking for additional dollars. As you know, there's many spectrums to housing. There's the preservation piece. Central does a really nice job on that. There's new construction. Three Rivers does an amazing job on that. Rental assistance with first-time home buyers, assistance and education. We provide many of those services and we work with our partners. The continuum is big. Some sure can't do it all. That's why we have many partners in the field. All of us structured a little bit differently, doing other nuances and whatnot. Our levy request, like I said, has those two options. I'm going to talk through option A first, which is, I'm just going to call that our traditional levy request. It's basically the same as last year, with the exception of the general fund overhead. And I want to hit on that one just a little bit because that was a question that came up. The general fund overhead is spread to all four counties. Like I said, Sumter's a multi-county. We operate in Wabasha, Winona, Goodhue, and Dodge County. All four counties pay their fair share based on the population. That general fund overhead is partially paid by some of our programs, like any government department, Health and Human Services, your EDA. Sumter is like that, but we're multi-county. We're outside of the county, but for many counties, HRAs are part of the county. We need that levy to help support those programs. So that's what that overhead helps to pay for. And as I said, it's spread to all three counties or all four counties evenly. At that point, then it differs. And Goodhue County, as I said, has made housing a priority and has, I would say more so than the other three counties that we support. We have community development. There's 27,500 of that, of our total levy request of under option A of 429,435. I'll back up. 73,435 is for the general fund portion. That's that piece that's spread evenly. 27,500 is for community development. That's for staffing. It's for grant leverage. Our community development, like our small cities grants that you see in various communities, we can pull in about 600,000 a year for those grants that we're writing. So obviously that return on investment. For housing development, there's staffing. We use some of the 44,500 for housing preservation and stabilization, our first time home buyer program. Some of the programs that we have and that we offer, you cannot utilize, there's not an admin function for that. So that's why there's that separate staffing costs that's paid for. We do education, counseling, and training, and we also work to preserve and retain naturally occurring affordable housing in our small communities. In addition to housing development, in the past, the board invested in two developments, and one is in Kenyon. It's the Kenyon Countryside Meadow TIF. It's a housing development and the board supports the debt service of 25,000 per year on that. And in Goodhue County, back in the 1990s, 64 units of housing was built and the board has geo-backed and we have revenue bonds on that project as well. As part of those bond documents, the board pledged bonding to ensure 110% of debt service coverage. We levy almost $150,000 a year to keep those 5 properties affordable. In addition to that, and I would add that as housing development, we fund the housing trust fund for $100,000. I'm going to talk just a little bit briefly on the housing trust fund. We currently have about $500,000 sitting in that housing trust fund. The committee meets twice a year. In March, we were ready to go. We were going to spend that money on preservation within Goodhue County. And then the state came through with the 1.4 billion and we said, whoa, let's stop because we want to get as much as we possibly can with those funds available. We could spend them tomorrow in preservation, but we want to match that and try to bring as much money back from the state as possible. So $100,000 again as part of that request, and then finally $10,000 for emergency housing for homelessness. And that usually goes for reimbursement of overnight stays or that period of time between identifying that somebody's homeless and we get them actually housed in permanent housing. I'm going to just pause there. That's option A. That's the traditional levy. Any questions on that piece?
Do you have any idea how much has been spent out of the housing trust fund?
We have one very active program that we've earmarked for down payment assistance, and we spent a little bit over $100,000 on down payment assistance. We spent $15,000 for the housing study, and we also spent, I want to say, $10,000 or $15,000 on a land trust for the city of Cannon Falls. The philosophy of the committee has been to let's let these dollars grow because we want to do something big. You can spend this money. We could spend it like that on preservation, but the thought has been let's hold it and let's build something. Let's do production. Any other? Okay. So, as I said, we have 2 options. Option B includes option A plus add-ons. And the add-ons, as I said, are meant to address the 1.3 billion at the state. They specifically address capacity. I want to be able to go after as much money as I possibly can. I just don't have the staffing to do that. The second piece is leverage. And we're asking for 40,000 for the capacity piece for staffing. And we're asking for 500,000 for to fund the housing trust fund to go after for match money. That is over and above the money that's sitting in there in the housing trust fund today. I don't see the 500,000 being a reoccurring request from the HRA. This is to match and try to bring home as much money as we possibly can. Let's just say you spend the $40,000 on capacity and we're not funded for anything. The $500,000 would sit there in the housing trust fund. It's not lost. It is controlled. It's restricted funds specifically for the purposes of the housing trust fund. The capacity piece is for grant writing for Goodhue County. It's not for Wabasha, Winona, Dodge County. Why 40,000 and why 500,000? 40,000 being multi-county HRA. I didn't know what my 4 counties would say. Sorry, my phone went off earlier. I was checking it because I have Wabasha County board meeting going on right now. Wabasha County, as part of their preliminary levy, they voted for option A and 20,000 for the capacity. They did not add money to their housing trust fund because they don't have a housing trust fund as of today, but they are looking to add their local housing aid to their housing trust fund and having Semstra manage that. Winona County passed the option A plus 40,000 and their housing trust fund component of 50,000. They do not have a housing trust fund either. And as I said, the request on the housing trust fund for Goodhue County was because of where you're at. You have priorities for housing. I want you to have all those opportunities. You have a goal of 2,200. there aren't those goals in the other cities. So just getting a housing trust fund set up for them doesn't mean the request for them won't be 500,000 next year. But it's just that first step. You're a step ahead. So the other thing I want to add is, I talked about the 20,000 in Wabasha, about 50,000. Dodge County person asked me, well, what if we don't give you the full amount? And my response to that was, I will take whatever you can get to try to bring part of that $1.3 billion back here to southeastern Minnesota. So the asterisk on the leverage piece is it's up to you. The 500,000, you obviously have a lot of things in front of you today as well, and bigger picture than just housing. But that's the opportunity that we're bringing forward to the county board.
And why 500,000 as opposed to 2, 3?
It gets you pretty darn close to your max levy. Your max levy is 1,191,000 approximately. The 500 was just I guess I could have rounded up to 600,000. Get you pretty close to your max levy. That was the intent there.
Thank you. Yes.
Well, we talk about the 40,000 being staffing. That doesn't necessarily mean we're adding staffing. It may be a consultant to write grants. It might not. But there's only like a 2-year window on this 1.3 billion. So either if you want to wait a year, chances are most of it's going to be gone. So, I think it's critical that we go after the grants. How we put dollars aside for if we get the grants, we could do it do it through this system, put 500,000 in here. And I would recommend we put some in there, and maybe it's not 500,000, maybe it is 300,000. But I think you have to have those dollars there to match when you go after a grant. And what you're looking at is tripling your money, quadrupling your money, whatever. So I support option B, first to get the housing development staff, and second, whatever level we want to do going into the housing trust fund. If it's 300,000, fine. We can match that with some of the dollars we already have there. But if you don't, we're serious about housing. We're serious about the mix of housing. Semtra isn't the same housing that Three Rivers isn't the same housing that the apartment builders are, isn't the same housing as single family. You need to have all those areas of housing covered, because leaving a gap doesn't really fill the housing market that you need to fill. So, I would support maybe not 500, but maybe 300 going into that housing trust fund this year with option B and getting a higher amount. And I'd really like to hear from people on the housing subcommittee who hear this every month or two when you meet, what the thoughts are there.
Yes.
So I had a conversation with Buffy this morning and with Three Rivers yesterday, just to try to better understand things. And when I spoke with Three Rivers, I asked about other county trust funds, and they said they didn't work with any other counties who had trust funds. Okay. And then I think you thought that was incorrect because Dodge County recently had one. Okay. And then the amount of money in other counties' trust funds of similar size, I believe, is way less than the 500,000 we currently have. And so I think it's true. We're ahead and not behind. And so then I think it becomes that question. And then I asked Three Rivers, well, if these other counties don't have trust funds, how do you get your grants? Because they're pretty good at getting grants. And so I wondered how they did it. And what they said is if they had a grant that they were writing that they wanted county support on, which usually for them had to do with forgiving the building permits. And I think with the cities, with the TIF, they came to the county with the grant that they wanted to do and see if the county would support that. Okay. So I do think that whatever number we set, that doesn't mean that Buffy, if there was some terrific deal for the county, it wouldn't mean that we as a board couldn't review that deal and decide if we wanted to support that or not. And then I asked Three Rivers, well, what's the advantage of one over the other? And she thought that the advantage of coming to the board is then the board as a group was more aware of what the proposal was and how much money was going to that proposal. And she thought the advantage to the trust fund, although she doesn't work with any trust funds, so, you know, she was just speculating, was that it allowed them more flexibility in terms of what they applied for. But I just was trying to Google, like I do many things, and Candy Ojai County was just starting a trust fund. And I think the total they have in there is 175,000, and that's a roughly similar size county to what we are. And then I think you said Winona was putting in 50,000, and we have 10 preliminarily, but we have 10 times that in there. So I wouldn't be supportive of the 500,000. I don't think we need to have that much money sitting there. And I think if there was some great project that was good for Goodhue County, Buffy could come to us and make the case, and we could add additional money then. I don't know what the right number is. I think you said that the 40,000 really is to cover the grants for this particular money that the state's putting in, and that wouldn't necessarily be an ongoing expense either.
Correct.
It's more to make sure we get this money. And I asked you, is the 40,000, is the grant writer worthwhile without the 500,000? And you said yes, it would be. You thought that was the most important part. So I'm definitely in favor of the 40,000 for the grant writing. And I think we have to come up with a number that we think is reasonable on top of the 500,000 they're already sitting on. But again, I would say they can come back. So it's not that that this would be locked in stone either.
Just one comment on the Housing Trust Fund. Part of our guidelines states any project over 25,000 does come back to the county board for final approval.
Mhm.
So you are involved in that decision-making process. It would be vetted out through the RFP process, and all of that work is done as part of the Housing Trust Fund Committee. The final projects are coming back forward to the board for final approval.
Knowing none of the rules or guidelines for writing these grants are out yet. Probably
Correct.
be middle of 24 before we see them.
Right.
In your past experience, has it been when you're writing a grant, you need to say you have access to match money?
Yes.
And that's key to our 500,000 is now you can say we have 500 or 600,000 of match money that we already have. If you have to go back to the board and say, well, I'm going to write this grant, will you have the match money? That's different because it actually slows the process down.
Yeah,
But
although I will point out Three Rivers is very good at getting grants,
Mhm.
and they're doing it not with the housing trust funds.
a little bit different market
Yeah.
than what we would be going after. It's kind of like public health and human services.
We,
They're similar, but they're different. They
We-
don't go after the same
I
kind of
understand that. I
thing.
understand
So
they aren't identical, and the rules aren't the same because of the one being a nonprofit and the other being, I don't know quite what to call.
Other government.
All right, other
Yeah.
government. But right now there's 500. If we put in the 100 that we normally do, that's 600. And so in my mind, putting in 200,000 would be pretty generous.
Mhm.
And that they could come back and talk to us if we wanted to do more than that. So I wouldn't support 5. I could support 2. And I don't know what the rest of you think, but
Yes.
So if we go with option A, we're not gonna go after any of the 1.2 billion.
Good question. Thank you for pointing that out. Was my last point I wanted to make. We will always go after what we've always gone after. So there's 16 programs out there funded with this 1.3 billion. Half the programs are new, half of them are not. We will still continue to apply for all grants that we always have been. Our requests are going to be bigger. And we will continue to do those. Because we have staff that are doing that. The other 8 new programs, that's what I'm talking about for us to go after. One of them, for example, is targeted for rural Minnesota. It's an infrastructure program. If we put in 500, they will match up to $500,000 for roads, streets, water, sewer. So that's one grant that's out there, one new grant. I don't know any more program guidelines other than that. But that's an example of one of the new programs.
So Buffy, with these new programs that are coming out, and then let's say the housing units are built, then are those all housing units that are part of the new tax base?
Yes,
I think it said somewhere in here, you pay 44,000 something in taxes in Goodhue County right now.
at least, and I don't have.
I
it
think it's
really.
44.
44.5.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. No, they're tax base. Yeah.
And the new units wouldn't necessarily be built by Semtra. They could be built by Three Rivers. There could be partnerships. By putting the money in the Housing Trust Fund, this isn't just restricted to Semtra accessing those dollars. We're talking about CETA, we're talking about Three Rivers, we're talking about any other housing developer that's out there that qualifies underneath that. So we need all players at the table.
It's probably the one thing that Buffy has brought to this organization is the cooperation. Jenny sits on the Housing Trust Fund.
That's why
County-
she could answer a lot of my questions, I
Yeah.
bet.
Yeah, she sits on our Housing Trust Fund board.
Mhm.
She meets with us. So yeah, it's key that we aren't duplicating and we aren't competing really right with each other, that we talk and plan together. So yeah, that's.
We could
So
each. be-
you alluded to 200. So
I
are
did.
you saying the 40 plus the 200
That's
added
what I
on
said.
to the option A?
That's what I said.
I would move that.
I'll second that. Any other comments? All right, it's been moved and seconded to agree to option B at a funding of the 3% plus
The 40 plus the 200,
40 plus 200,000.
not 500, 200.
Yes. All right, any other questions, comments? All right, been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
All right, passes 3-2.
Thank you.
All right, for your information, we've had several reports here that everyone's had a chance to go over. County Board Committee report. Well, I have a couple things from the policy committee from Association Minnesota Counties, just to think about. In the next 5 years, 30% of Minnesota ambulance service directors are saying that they do not believe that they can continue their services and meet the demands moving forward in the next 5 years at the current rate they're going. The policy committee is lobbying the legislature to invest in some innovative new pilot projects to see what can work better, because what's working now is not sustainable. Department of Corrections talked about violent crime in the state is pretty stable. However, there's a dramatic increase in younger offenders doing violent crime. And they talked about 12 and under, that has increased dramatically. They went and interviewed youth at the Minnesota Correctional Facility here in Red Wing. 9 out of 10 of the residents there have been a victim of a gunshot wound in their lifetime. When asked about their comment, they were asked about why do you have to have so many guns? And their comment was that everybody else has guns and they need one too to survive. So what Department of Corrections is looking for are better solutions to juvenile crime, specifically prevention and intervention. They are going to be coming up with, they recognize that they have a much more complex infrastructure, and there will be $70 million worth of grants coming available in the future for prevention and intervention. There were also discussions ongoing between probation and Department of Corrections because mental health assessments are absolutely essential to be able to move forward and get people the help that they actually might need in the criminal justice system to actually get them out and possibly keep them out. The consensus was that mental health issues are getting much more complex. And there's also $360 million coming in public safety money in December, and they are looking for projects, creative projects people might have to be able to move forward with something innovative. The next generation 911, they're working on the GIS update because GIS has to be incorporated within this. 32 counties have submitted all their information to the state database. I don't know if Goodhue County has or not.
I don't know either.
Okay. 56% are complete. 80% of the counties in the state are halfway there. There is $7 million coming in grants for first year financial support to make the transition to plan, use for cybersecurity, GIS data collection, and 9/11 equipment. So there is a lot of money out there coming forward in the world of criminal justice. We just have to have some creative ideas to go for it. So, any other committee report?
I take it, just a question, do all of you get the report that comes out after our AMC board meetings?
District 9. Or after the board meeting, then I got one on District 9 too.
That's the one you write.
Yeah.
That's the one that I don't write, but it looks like it comes from me. But yeah, so you're up to date on what comes out of AMC board. I thought the policy conference was excellent. The forum they had talking about combined dispatch, and they talked about the tax forfeiture. And there was one more. They had 3 different panels. What was the third panel on? Was family resource centers, and it was really good. And Carver County's got one that's going really, really well. They were really good. That was a really good session. Good information. So, yeah.
When they talk about district dispatch centers or regional, what are they talking? One within 4 counties?
Actually, it was Candioi County, which does Grant County, which are not next to each other. They are quite a ways apart. And they actually, Grant County only has like 4,200 residents. Their dispatch is over with Candioi County, and they were talking about how that joint venture worked. So but there's a lot of talk around the state about doing something about regional dispatch because the equipment is so expensive, and we all do it, and we all replace it, and we all steal from each other for employees, and we could do a lot better job being regional. And in southeast Minnesota, Olmsted County just took their dispatch away from the sheriff's office and put it in a separate office. And Rochester Police are part of that. So they took it away I shouldn't say took it away. They moved it from sheriff's to a separate location. So, and they are interested in doing something about regional dispatch, as is everybody. And then in conversations yesterday, the whole jail situation in southeast Minnesota is kind of going awry with different counties building jails. And quite frankly, one county who houses for 2 counties, when they get pulled out, will have 1 prisoner in a jail system that's not paid for, that costs $1 million a year to run. And right now they have 1 prisoner from their county. So there just has to be more cooperation. And Semtra is one of those that is doing cooperation. And we just need to keep finding ways to do that, because that's the only way we're gonna get more efficient.
Exchanging software and sharing software in our dispatch system through the different dispatch centers. So the process is starting.
Yeah, we just need to figure out how to lessen the number, make them roll over to each other, and be covered in a better way.
James?
Move approval. Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to pay the bills. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes.
Move to adjourn.
Second. Been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you. Can we come back in 3 minutes?
Yep.